Chapter 9. He had heard all. He did not walk into the room, but actually ran in, pale with emotion and with fury. Zina gazed at him in amazement. "So that's how it is!" he shouted, panting. "At last I have found out what you are!" "What I am?" repeated Zina, staring at him as though he were mad, and all at once her eyes flashed with anger. "How dare you speak like that to me?" she cried, going up to him. "I have heard it all," Mozgliakov repeated solemnly, though he involuntarily drew back a step. "You heard? You've been listening," said Zina, looking at him disdainfully. "Yes, I've been listening. Yes, I brought myself to do a low thing, but I learned what you are, the most... I don't know what words to use to tell you, what you have shown yourself to be," he answered, quailing more and more before Zina's eyes. "If you have heard, what can you blame me for? What right have you to blame me? What right have you to speak so rudely to me?" "I? What right have I? And you can ask that? You are going to marry the prince, and I have no right? Why, you gave me your word." "When?" "How can you ask when?" "Why, only this morning, when you were pestering me, I told you straight out that I could say nothing positive." "But you did not drive me away. You did not refuse me altogether. So you were keeping me in reserve. So you were drawing me on." A look of suffering, as though from an acute, piercing internal pain, came into Zina's irritated face, but she mastered her feeling. "That I did not drive you away," she said clearly and emphatically, though there was a scarcely perceptible quiver in her voice, "was solely through pity. You implored me yourself to take time, not to say no, but to get to know you better, and then, you said, then when you are convinced that I am an honorable man, perhaps you will not refuse me. Those were your own words when first you pressed your suit. You cannot draw back from them. You had the insolence to say just now that I drew you on. But you saw yourself my aversion when I met you today, a fortnight earlier than you promised. That aversion I did not conceal from you. On the contrary, I displayed it. You noticed it yourself, for you asked me whether I was angry with you for coming back sooner. You know one is not drawing a man on if one cannot and does not care to conceal one's aversion. You have had the insolence to say that I was keeping you in reserve. To that I will answer that what I thought about you was, though he is not endowed with very much intelligence, he may yet be a good man, and so one might marry him. But now I am convinced, to my relief, that you are a fool, and what's more, an ill-natured fool. I have only now to wish you every happiness, and bon voyage. Goodbye." Saying this, Zina turned from him and walked slowly towards the door. Mozgliakov, guessing that all was lost, boiled with rage. "Ah, so I am a fool!" he cried. "So now I am a fool. Very well. Goodbye. But before I go away, I'll tell the whole town how you and your mamma have tricked the old prince after making him drunk. I'll tell everyone. I'll show you what Mozgliakov can do." Zina shuddered and was stopping to answer. But after a moment's thought, she merely shrugged her shoulders contemptuously and slammed the door after her. At that moment, Marya Alexandrovna appeared in the doorway. She had heard Mozgliakov's exclamation, in an instant guessed what it meant, and shuddered with alarm. Mozgliakov had not gone yet. Mozgliakov near the prince. Mozgliakov would spread it all over the town, and secrecy for a short time at least was essential. Marya Alexandrovna had her own calculations. She instantly grasped the situation, and the plan for subduing Mozgliakov was already formed. "What is the matter, mon ami?" she said, going up to him and holding out her hand affectionately. "What? Mon ami?" he cried furiously. "After what you have been plotting, you call me mon ami? You don't catch me, honored madame. And do you suppose you can deceive me again?" "I am grieved, very much grieved, to see you in such a strange state of mind, Pavel Alexandrovitch. What an expression to use! You do not even curb your language before a lady." "Before a lady? You may be anything you like, but not a lady," cried Mozgliakov. I don't know what he meant to express by this exclamation, but probably something very tremendous. Marya Alexandrovna looked blandly into his face. "Sit down," she said mournfully, motioning him to the chair on which a quarter of an hour before the prince had been reposing. "But do listen, Marya Alexandrovna," cried Mozgliakov in perplexity. "You look at me as though you were not to blame in any way, but as though I had treated you badly. You can't go on like that, you know. Such a tone! Why, it is beyond all human endurance. Do you know that?" "My friend," answered Marya Alexandrovna, "you must still allow me to call you that, for you have no better friend than I. My friend, you are unhappy, you are distressed, you are wounded to the heart, and so it is not to be wondered at that you speak to me in such a tone. But I am resolved to reveal to you everything, to open my whole heart, the more readily as I feel myself somewhat to blame in regard to you. Sit down, let us talk." There was a sickly softness in Marya Alexandrovna's voice. There was a look of suffering in her face. Mozgliakov, astounded, sat down in an easy-chair beside her. "You have been listening?" she said, looking reproachfully into his face. "Yes, I have been listening. If I hadn't listened, I should have been a duffer. Anyway, I have found out all that you were plotting against me," Mozgliakov answered rudely, growing bolder and working himself into a passion. "And you, with your breeding, with your principles, could bring yourself to such an action? Oh, good heavens!" Mozgliakov positively jumped up from his chair. "But, Marya Alexandrovna," he cried, "it is insufferable to listen to this. Think what you have brought yourself to do with your principles, and then you judge other people." "Another question," she said without answering him. "Who put you up to listening? Who told you? Who was the spy here? That's what I want to know." "Excuse me, but I won't tell you that." "Very well, I shall find out for myself. I said, Paul, that I had treated you badly. But if you go into all the circumstances, you will see that, even if I am to blame, it is solely through a desire for your good." "Mine? My good? That is beyond everything. I warn you, you won't delude me again. I am not such a child as that." And he writhed in the armchair with such violence that it creaked. "Please, my dear boy, keep cool if you can. Listen to me attentively, and you will agree with everything yourself. To begin with, I intended to tell you about it at once, everything, and you would have heard the whole business from me in the fullest details without demeaning yourself to listen. That I did not explain it to you before was simply because it was only a project. It might not have come off. You see, I am being perfectly open with you. Secondly, do not blame my daughter. She loves you madly, and it cost me incredible effort to draw her away from you and to induce her to consent to accept the prince. I have just had the happiness to receive the fullest proof of that mad love, Mozgliakov pronounced ironically. Very good. But how were you speaking to her? Was that the way that a lover should speak? Was that the way, indeed, for a well-bred man to speak? You wounded and irritated her. It is not a question of breeding now, Marya Alexandrovna. And this morning, after you had both treated me to such honeyed looks, I went off with the prince, and you blackguarded me behind my back. You called me names, let me tell you that. I know all about it, I know. And no doubt from the same foul source, said Marya Alexandrovna with a contemptuous smile. Yes, Pavel Alexandrovitch, I did disparage you. I did talk against you, and I must confess I had a hard struggle. But the very fact that I had to abuse you to her, even to slander you, that very fact proves how hard it was for me to extort her consent to abandon you. You short-sighted man! If she did not care for you, would there have been any need for me to blacken your character, to put you in an undignified and ridiculous light, to resort to such extreme measures? But you do not know everything yet. I had to use my maternal authority to eradicate you from her heart, and after incredible efforts I wrung from her only the appearance of agreement. If you were listening just now, you must have noticed that she did not support me with the prince by one word, one gesture. Throughout the whole scene she scarcely uttered a single word. She sang like an automaton. Her whole soul was aching with despondency, and it was from pity for her that, at last, I got the prince away. I am sure that she wept as soon as she was alone. When you came in here, you must have noticed her tears. Mozgliakov did, in fact, remember that when he ran into the room, he had noticed that Zina was in tears. But why were you against me, Marya Alexandrovna? She cried. Why did you blacken my character? Why did you slander me, as you yourself confess you did? Ah, that is a different matter. If you had asked that question sensibly in the beginning, you would have had an answer to it long ago. Yes, you are right. It has all been my doing, and only mine. Don't mix Zina up in it. What was my object? I answer, in the first place, it was for Zina's sake. The prince is a man of rank and fortune. He has connections, and marrying him, Zina would make a splendid match. Besides, if he dies, perhaps before long indeed, for we are all more or less mortal, then Zina will be a young widow, a princess in the highest society, and perhaps very wealthy. Then she can marry anyone she likes. She would be able to make a still wealthier match. But of course she will marry the man she loves, the man she loved before, whose heart she wounded by marrying the prince. Remorse alone would force her to atone for her treatment of the man she loved before. mumbled Mozgliakov, looking thoughtfully at his boots. "And the second thing is, and I will only mention it briefly," Marya Alexandrovna went on, "for perhaps you will not understand it. You read your Shakespeare and draw all your lofty sentiments from him, but in real life, though you are very good, you are too young, and I am a mother, Pavel Alexandrovitch. Listen, I am giving Zina to the prince partly for his sake, to save him by this marriage. I loved that noble, most kindly, chivalrously honourable old man in the past. We were friends. He is unhappy in the claws of that hellish woman. She will bring him to his grave. God is my witness that I only persuaded Zina to consent to marry the prince by putting before her all the greatness of her heroic self-sacrifice. She was carried away by the nobility of her feelings, by the fascination of an act of sacrifice. There is something chivalrous in her, too. I put before her what a lofty Christian act it was to be the prop, the comfort, the friend, the child, the lovely idol of one who has perhaps but 1 year yet to live. No hateful woman, no terror, no despondency should be about him in the last days of his life, but brightness, affection, love. These last declining days would seem like paradise to him. Where is the egoism in that? Tell me, pray. It is more like the noble deed of a sister of mercy than egoism." "So you are doing this simply for the sake of the old prince, simply as the sacrifice of a sister of mercy?" muttered Mozgliakov in an ironical voice. "I understand that question, Pavel Alexandrovitch. It is clear enough. You imagine, perhaps, that the interests of the prince are Jesuitically intertwined with our own advantage. Well, possibly these considerations were present in my brain, only they were not Jesuitical, but unconscious. I know that you will be amazed at so open a confession, but one thing I do beg of you, Pavel Alexandrovitch, don't mix Zina up in that. She is pure as a dove. She is not calculating. She is capable of nothing but love, my sweet child. If anyone has been calculating, it is I, and I alone. But in the first place, search your own conscience sternly, and tell me, who would not calculate in my position in a case like this? We consider our interests even in the most magnanimous, even in the most disinterested of our actions. Inevitably, involuntarily, we consider them. No doubt we all deceive ourselves when we assure ourselves that we are acting solely from noble motives. I don't want to deceive myself. I admit that for all the purity of my motives, I was calculating. But ask yourself, am I interested on my own behalf? I want nothing, Pavel Alexandrovitch. I have lived my life. I am calculating for her sake, for the sake of my angel, for my child, and what mother can blame me for it?" Tears glistened in Marya Alexandrovna's eyes. Pavel Alexandrovitch listened in astonishment to this candid confession, and blinked incredulously. "Well, yes, what mother would?" he said at last. "You pitch a fine tale, Marya Alexandrovna, but you know, you gave me your word. You gave me hopes. How about me? Only think, you've made me look a pretty fool, haven't you?" "But surely you don't imagine that I haven't thought of you, mon cher Paul? The advantage for you in all this was so immense that it was that, indeed, that chiefly impelled me to undertake it all." "Advantage for me?" cried Mozgliakov, completely dumbfounded this time. "How so?" "My goodness, can anyone be so simple and short-sighted?" cried Marya Alexandrovna, turning up her eyes to the ceiling. "Oh, youth, youth! That is what comes of burying oneself in that Shakespeare, of dreaming, and of imagining that one is thinking for oneself when one is following the thoughts and the mind of others. You ask, my good Pavel Alexandrovitch, where your advantage is to be found in it. Allow me, for the sake of clearness, to make a digression. Zina loves you, that is beyond doubt. But I have noticed that, in spite of her obvious feeling for you, she has a secret lack of confidence in you, in your good feelings, in your propensities. I have noticed that at times she behaves to you, as it were intentionally, with coldness, the result of uncertainty and lack of confidence. Have you noticed that yourself, Pavel Alexandrovitch?" "I have noticed it, and today indeed. But what do you mean to say, Marya Alexandrovna?" "There, you see you have noticed it yourself. So I was not mistaken then. She has a strange lack of confidence in the stability of your character. I am a mother, and is it not for me to divine the secrets of my child's heart? Imagine now that instead of rushing into the room with reproaches, and even with abuse, irritating her, wounding and insulting her in her purity, her goodness, and her pride, and so unwittingly confirming her suspicions of your evil propensities, imagine that you had accepted it all mildly, with tears of regret, perhaps even of despair, but with lofty nobility of feeling. No, do not interrupt me, Pavel Alexandrovitch. I want to paint the whole picture which will strike your imagination. Imagine that you had gone to her and said, 'Zinaida, I love you more than life itself, but family reasons divide us. I understand those reasons. They are for your happiness, and I do not venture to rebel against them, Zinaida. I forgive you. Be happy if you can.' And at that point you would fix your gaze upon her, the gaze of a lamb at the sacrifice, if I may so express myself. Imagine all that, and only think what effect such words would have had on her heart." "Yes, Marya Alexandrovna, let us suppose all that. I understand all that. But after all, if I had said all that, I should have gained nothing by it." No, my dear, don't interrupt me. I want to picture the scene in every detail, that it may make the right impression on you. Imagine that you meet her again a little later in the highest society. Meet her at some ball, in a brilliantly lighted room, to the intoxicating strains of music, in the midst of magnificent women, and in the midst of this gay festival, you alone, mournful, melancholy, pale, leaning somewhere against a column, but so that you can be seen. Watch her in the whirl of the ball. She dances. Around you flow the intoxicating strains of Strauss and the scintillating wit of the highest society, while you stand alone, pale and crushed by your passion. What will Zinaida feel then, do you suppose? With what eyes will she look at you? And she will think, I doubted of that man who has sacrificed for me all, and has rent his heart for my sake. Her old love would, of course, rise up again with irresistible force." Marya Alexandrovna stopped to take breath. Mozgliakov wriggled in his easy chair with such violence that it creaked again. Marya Alexandrovna went on. For the prince's health, Zina will go abroad, to Italy, to Spain, where there are myrtles, lemons, where the sky is blue, where there is the Guadalquivir, the land of love, where one cannot live without loving, the land of roses, where kisses, so to speak, float in the air. You will follow her there. You will sacrifice your past in the service, your connections, everything. There your love will begin with irresistible force. Love, youth, Spain, my God! Your love, of course, is untainted, holy, though you will languish gazing at one another. You understand me, mon ami? Of course there will be base, treacherous people, monsters who would declare that you have not been tempted abroad by family feeling for a suffering old relation. I have purposely called your love untainted, because such people will perhaps give it a very different significance. But I am a mother, Pavel Alexandrovitch, and am I likely to lead you astray? Of course the prince will not be in a condition to look after you both. But what of that? Could such an abominable calumny be based on that? At last he will die, blessing his fate. Tell me, whom would Zina marry if not you? You are such a distant relation of the prince's that can be no hindrance to your marriage. You will wed her, young, wealthy, distinguished, and only think, when the grandest of our noblemen would be proud to marry her. Through her you will gain a footing in the highest circles of society. Through her you will gain the highest rank and position. Now you have 150 serfs, but then you will be rich. The prince will arrange everything in his will. I will see to that. And lastly, and most important, she will have gained complete confidence in you, in your heart, in your feelings, and you will become in her eyes a hero of goodness and self-sacrifice. And after that you ask where your advantage comes in? Why, you must be blind not to reflect, not to consider that advantage, when it stands not 2 steps from you, staring you in the face, smiling at you and crying out to you, "Here I am, your advantage!" Pavel Alexandrovitch, upon my word! Marya Alexandrovna! Cried Mozgliakov in extraordinary excitement. Now I understand it all. I have behaved coarsely, basely, and caddishly. He leapt up from his seat and clutched his hair. And unreflectingly, added Marya Alexandrovna, above all, unreflectingly. I am an ass, Marya Alexandrovna, he cried, almost in despair. Now all is lost, because I loved her so madly. Perhaps all is not lost, said Madame Moskolev softly, as though pondering something. Oh, if that were possible, help me, teach me, save me. And Mozgliakov burst into tears. My dear, said Marya Alexandrovna with commiseration, giving him her hand, you have acted from excess of ardour, from the fervour of your passion, that is, from love for her. You were in despair. You did not know what you were doing. She ought to understand all that. I love her to madness, and am ready to sacrifice anything to her, cried Mozgliakov. I tell you what, I will set you right with her. Marya Alexandrovna? Yes, I will undertake to do that. I will bring you together. You must tell her everything as I have told it you just now. Oh, God, how kind you are, Marya Alexandrovna! But Would it be impossible to do it at once? God forbid! Oh, how inexperienced you are, my dear! She is so proud. She will take this as a fresh insult, as insolence. Tomorrow I will arrange it all. But now go away, to see that merchant, for instance. Come in the evening, perhaps, but I would not advise you to. I will go away, I will. My God, you bring me back to life. But one more question. What if the prince doesn't die so soon? Oh, my God, how naive you are, mon cher Paul. On the contrary, you must pray for his health. We must, with all our hearts, hope for length of days for that dear, kind, chivalrously honourable old man. I shall be the first to pray night and day with tears in my eyes for my daughter's happiness. But alas, I fear the prince's health is hopeless. Moreover, he will have now to visit Petersburg to take Zina into society. I fear that this may be too much for him. But we will pray for the best, cher Paul, and the rest is in God's hands. You are going now. I bless you, mon ami. Hope, be patient, be manly above all things, be manly. I never doubted the nobility of your sentiments. She pressed his hand warmly, and Mozgliakov walked out of the room on tiptoe. "Well, I have got rid of one fool," she said triumphantly. "There are others left." The door opened, and Zina came in. She was paler than usual. Her eyes were flashing. "Mamma," she said, "finish it quickly, or I can't endure it. It's all so vile and nasty that I am ready to run out of the house. Don't torture me, don't irritate me. I feel sick, do you hear? Sick of all this filth." "Zina, what is the matter with you, my angel? You have been listening," cried Marya Alexandrovna, looking intently and uneasily at Zina. "Yes, I have been listening. Do you want to put me to shame as you did that fool? Listen, I swear that if you go on torturing me like this, and assign to me all sorts of low parts in this low farce, I will throw it all up and make an end of it at one blow. It is enough that I have brought myself to do the vile thing that is most important. But I did not know myself. I shall be stifled in this filth." And she went out, slamming the door. Marya Alexandrovna gazed after her and pondered. "Haste, haste!" she cried, starting. "She is the chief trouble, the chief danger. And if all these scoundrels won't let us alone, if they spread it all over the town, as they probably have done by now, all is lost. She will never endure the hubbub and will refuse. At all costs we must take the prince into the country, and promptly too. I will fly off first myself, will haul along my blockhead and bring him here. He must make himself useful at last. Meanwhile the old man will have had his sleep out, and we will set off." She rang the bell. "The horses?" she asked the servant who came in. "They have been ready a long while," answered the footman. The horses had been ordered at the moment when Marya Alexandrovna was taking the prince upstairs. She dressed, but first ran into Zina to tell her in rough outline her decision and to give her some instructions. But Zina could not listen to her. She was lying on her bed with her face in her pillow and her white arms bare to the elbows. She was shedding tears and tearing her long, exquisite hair. At moments she shuddered all over as though a cold shiver were running over her limbs. Marya Alexandrovna began talking, but Zina did not even lift her head. After standing for some time beside her, Marya Alexandrovna went out in confusion, and to vent her feelings got into the carriage and told her coachman to drive as fast as he could. "It's a nuisance that Zina overheard it," she thought as she got into the carriage. "I brought Mozgliakov round with the same words that I used with her. She is proud, and perhaps was wounded. But the great thing is to make haste and settle it all before they have got wind of it. It's a pity. Well, and what if by ill luck the fool is not at home?" And at the mere thought of that, she was overcome with the fury that boded nothing pleasant to Afanasy Matveyevitch. She could hardly sit still for impatience. The horses whirled her along full speed. Breaking in. The parallelism between the arguments presented here to Mozgliakov and the ones used with Zina in Chapter 5 should be obvious. But of course Marya Alexandrovna switches out the romantic image which she employs in her peroration. In this case, she seems to be channeling a scene in a lengthy narrative poem by Pushkin entitled Evgeny Onegin. Pushkin's story involves two ball scenes, one in the country and one in Petersburg, where the passions of two star-crossed lovers are rekindled. Pushkin's version, however, does not end so happily as the narrative that Marya Alexandrovna invites Mozgliakov to imagine. This image will be relevant later. End of comments.